Welcome to Sunday Theory webinar. This week we are focusing on Germany, specifically with the wine growing regions of the Mosel and the Rheingau. I think the syllabus that we have highlights this week as being Germany Wine Week. And to be honest with you really have to break up the different regions of Germany to try and understand it better. There's a lot to distill, and I think especially for those of us that don't necessarily speak German, the language can be pretty intimidating when it comes to trying to learn about the region. And so today, we're going to focus specifically on the Mosel and the Rheingau. We're going to talk a little bit about some ancient history, some grape varieties, things like that, some of the wine laws. But really, we're going to try to dive into the Anbaugebiet of Mosel and the Rheingau. We're going to look at the Bereich within them, specific Gemeinden and Einzellagen. Which I think is going to be super fun. So I'll give you a map to start. This is sort of a 30,000 foot flyover, and I should mention today, I would probably expect this is about 50 slides. So we're probably a little north of 30 minutes, although a lot of it's going to just be looking at maps down towards the end. So all the major regions of Germany here, you can see the focus regions for this week will be the Mosel and the Rheingau right here. And I think it's important to take a little closer look to a little more detailed map. You can see the Mosel River. Of course, we know with German wines that rivers are quite important. Obviously, you have the Ahr that goes to the Ahr. You have the Mosel that goes to the Mosel. You have the Nahe and the Nahe. And then the Rhine River, which affects anything that says Rhine, Mittelrhein, Rheingau, Rheinhessen, along with the Pfalz and Baden down here. And the two that kind of stick out as not being named after the region that they're in, although there are some naming qualities that you can look for. The Main River that cuts through Franken, and here you'll find all the different Bereiche that are named after the Main. And then in the Sachsen, you'll have Elbe, which is far out to the east. So ancient history of Germany, the Romans brought viticulture there over 2,000 years ago. When Charlemagne spread the vine east during the 8th century, it was to Germany as well. The Cistercian monks carried viticulture through the Dark Ages, and German wine growing sort of declined in the 16th and 17th centuries, but re-emerged in the 18th when Riesling came to the forefront. So vineyard ownership goes private after the French Revolution, and then sweet wine sort of took over the market. As far as modern history, phylloxera and severe climate spurred interest in hybrid grapes, which we're going to talk a little bit about here momentarily. The two world wars, of course, scarred and transformed the German wine landscape. The Russian Revolution and the American Prohibition dried up export markets that weren't already boycotted. World War II really drove out the Jewish community, accounted for 60 to 70% of the wine trade, and really ended German wine auctions. Most of those auctions are put on by the VDP in their respective Anbaugebiet. Agriculture rebounded in the 1950s with electrical and technical advances. Liebfraumilch sort of finds its heyday in the international markets. And then the Flurbereinigung seeks to modernize German vineyards by removing terraces, paving roads, and making vineyards accessible to machinery. And then we run into the 1971 German wine laws. As post-war Germany was putting ridiculous names and labels on its wines, they needed some simplification. So the easily achieved sweetness forced the law to regulate sugar occurring naturally in the grape, not residual sugar. But the allowance of Swiss reserve essentially broke the predicate system. You've also got the AP number, which was meant to ensure quality, but 96% of all German Qualitätswein or Predikateswein have it on the label. It was updated in 1982 to create Eiswein as an independent predicate level, and then in 2000 to allow classic and selection labeling terms meant to replace Halbtrocken and Trocken. So today there's 4 categories of wine, essentially. You have vine, otherwise known as Tafelwein, which carries no geographic designation, but it can list the variety and the vintage. You have Landwein, which is an IGP category for Trocken and Halbtrocken wines, which is dry and half dry. And then you have Qualitätswein, which is the PDO category for most of the country's top dry wines. Within that, Predikateswein is a subset of Qualitätswein, which covers all the country's best sweet wines. Minimum alcohol here is 7%, and then as you get up beyond Beerenauslese and Trockenbeerenauslese and Eichwein, that ABV is reduced to 5.5% minimum. The Bradaketswein sweetness levels are listed here. These are things that are important to know in general. And the way that it goes is Cabinet, Spätlese, Auslese, Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese, and Eichwein. These are degrees measured in Oakschul, which is the difference between a liter of water and must of what this weight is, essentially. So you'll find that in different Outbagebiet, some of the levels are different. So none of these are absolutes. This is just sort of a general range. You will find for Riesling at the Spätlese level. In the Mosel, it's 80 degrees Oakschul and 90 degrees in the Pfalz, which is the highest level for any of them. A couple of important ones to know there, but in general, if you just kind of want to have these ranges down, it'll certainly help you to understand what the wines are going to be like. The Verbrand Deutscher Bradaketsweinguter, you'll see the label here, which is the Traubenadler, the famous eagle grasping grapes. This is a national association comprising of approximately 200 members, formed from 10 different regional associations. Members commit to higher minimum must weights and lower maximum yields. All the wines are estate grown. The single vineyards must be hand harvested as well as any Bradaketswein of Auslese quality or higher. So as we get to that, Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese, and Eichwein. Traditional grapes must account for 80% of the acreage, which excludes hybrids generally. The Großlagen sites are banned, and this is an interesting thing. It's sort of like a village sort of labeling. So we kind of take that out, right? And then you see the Traubenadler and all the capsules, which is this label here. This really evolved from a natural wine movement to focus on vineyard sites in more of a Burgundian model. And you can see how it does that here with 4 categories. Gutswein, which is the regional, normally only labeled by the Anbagebiet, and you can see the higher yields here. Ortswein, which is typically village, labeled by a village village name and a statement of soil. Erste Lage, which would be like your Premier Cru in Burgundy, typically labeled in traditional fashion with the village and the vineyard names. So this would be like saying Gevrey Chambertin, right? And then your Grosse Lage, which is like your Grand Crus. Only the vineyard is labeled, and prominently so. So in the Burgundy model, you would say this is like Chambertin. Großgewächs is a Spätlese ripeness dry wine from a GC or a Grosse Lage vineyard. The reds must age a year in wood. And since Großgewächs wines are technically Qualitätswein, chaptalization is legal. So a little confusing, but hopefully if we bring it in, give it context with the Burgundy model, this can help you to sort of understand the labeling categories of the VDP. It should be important for us to always take a step back and look at Sekt when we talk about Germany. Germans are the biggest sparkling wine consumers per capita. Germany is the third largest producer of sparkling wine in the world. Still has a Sekt tax set by the Kaiser Wilhelm to help fund his navy, and it's at 1.02 euro per bottle. There's a handful of producers here that actually produce more Sekt than all of Champagne's production, which is pretty amazing. Now, the majority of the Sekt is actually drank in Germany, and there's a couple of different labeling things you should look for. Sekt, as it is, can come from anywhere, and so they can source it from other countries even as well. There's a lot of people that think that a lot of the Spanish Iren comes up here. But if it's called German Sekt, it has to be from Germany, so that's important to note. If you're looking for traditional method, you're looking for Klassike Flaschengären. Winzer Sekt is an exceptional single vineyard, state-grown sparkling wines. And then if you want something semi-sparkling, a little softer style, you'd be looking for Pearl Vine. A couple of other things to look for on German, just when speaking about German wine in general. You'll find the following terms: Alleinbesites, which is essentially a monopole. Alte Reuben, which means old vines. Esrigabefülling, which is estate bottled. Flaschengären, which is bottle fermented. Flurbereinigung, we mentioned that earlier, is the restructuring of German vineyards. Fuder, which is a 1,000-liter cask, pretty common in the Mosel. Gützefülling, which is state bottled, similar to Esragabefülling. Stück, which is a slightly larger 1,200-liter cask that's associated with the Rheingau. And Sonnenhör, and it's a sundial, which is often on a very steep vineyard. And if my pronunciations are awful, I certainly apologize for everybody, because I do not speak German. A couple of different hybrid grapes that are important to know the crosses on in German history: the Müller-Thurgau, crossed by Riesling and Madeleine Royale, Scheurebe, Riesling and Sylvaner, and then Dornfelder, which is the second most cultivated grape, at least as far as red grapes are concerned, has multiple parents. Take a look again here at the map just before we dive in too deep, but to again show you the focus of the Mosel here, and then the Rheingau right here. Cool. We start with the Rheingau. This is one continuous south-facing slope bordered by Wiesbaden and Rudesheim. And you can see here Wiesbaden to the northeast and Rudesheim to the southwest. The Giesenheim Institute is here. This is the top analogical school in Germany. The monks, the Cistercian monks that we talked about, arrived here in the 12th century to establish Kloster Eberbach and Johannesburg. And you can see that here. Sorry, here. 8 out of every 10 vines in the Rheingau are actually Riesling, so extremely important here. The first use of Cabernet to describe high-quality wine at Kloster Eberbach was in 1775. Spätlese was defined at the Kloster Johannesburg with the 1775 vintage. The Rhine River to the south, and you can see that here, and then the Tanis Mountains to the north up in here. Riesling and Spätburgunder are allowed for the Grossgewächs wines. And as we mentioned Grossgewächs earlier, Spätlese level dry wines from a Grosslage site, in each Anbaugebiet has their own restrictions as to what grape varieties can be utilized. In the case of the Rheingau, it is Riesling and Spätburgunder, otherwise known as Pinot Noir. You'll also find the Erstes Gewächs here, the first quality growth, which was developed in 1999 in the Rheingau. You'll know it by the 3 Roman arches here on sort of a black stripe. It's about 1,100 acres, or a third of the vineyard plantings are qualified. Again, Riesling and Spätburgunder only. Stringent selection, limited yield, manual harvesting, and a blind tasting panel. And these can be dry or sweet, actually. So this is really what I wanted to dive into with Germany, and to try and help people understand the flow of the region. We're going to look at maps. And I should state, during these videos, I show a lot of maps, and I always want to make sure and give credit to the sources for them. The maps in this presentation are from the German Wine Atlas book, and I recommend that you go out and get it, because some of these are pictures of the maps from within it. So we start with the Anbaugebiet, which is the largest viticultural production area, and this is called the Rheingau, right? And then you'll have the Bereich within the Rheingau of Johannesburg. In the situation of the Rheingau, there is only one Bereich, and that is Johannesburg. And then we'll get to the villages, which are the Gemeinden. And you can see all of these are within Johannesburg. And then we'll get to the vineyards, which will be within these little Gemeinde. And we'll take a look at those individually. But some important ones from the north to the south here: Assmanshausen, from the west to the east, Rudesheim, Giesenheim, Johannesburg, Winkel, Hallgarten, Kiedrich, Hattenheim, Erbach, and Hochheim. So we start, and we take a look again here at the Gemeinde of Assmanshausen, and an important village within it, or vineyard within it, is the Hurlenburg, which you can see to the far west of the Rheingau, up through here. The most important grape here really is Spätburgunder. Here you find slate with loam, quartzite from the Taunus range. Grape producers are Kessler and Domaine Assmanshausen. This is really the best growing region within the Rheingau for Pinot Noir, big time. Up next, as we follow the river down south, and then as it curves to the east, we find ourselves in the Gemeinde of Rudesheim, and there are 3 critical Einzellage here, and each one starts with Berg. Berg Schlossberg, Berg Roseneck, and Berg Rutland. For the Berg Schlossberg, most important grape, of course, is Riesling. You can see your altitude here. The steepness is very important though. It goes from anywhere from 5 degrees up to 70 degrees, which is insane. Really stony quartzite with red slate deposits, great producers, lights, and Schornborn. You can see the change when we get to the Berg Roseneck. The steepness gradient changes to 30 to 50 degrees. Again, lights, and then you'll find August Kessler. And then Berg Rotland, as you get further east, starts to flatten out again with the steepness. A little more stony with red and gray slate, quartzite, and gravel. And again, Schornborn and Joseph Leitz. So if you can remember Joseph Leitz, if anybody's looking for a producer of Rudesheim or Schloss Schornborn, you should be pretty solid. Some of these maps are absolutely terrible pictures, and I apologize. They're hard to find online, and that's why you have to go get that German Wine Atlas. It's a fantastic resource. In the Gemeinde of Giesenheim, you'll find the Einslage of Schloss Johannesburg listed here, and this is sort of on the north side of the Rhine River. You'll see the gradient for the steepness of the slope, 10 to 45 degrees, and of course, Domain Schloss Johannesburg, right? As we get further east, and you can see Schloss Johannesburg was here. Now we're getting into Winkel, and we're going to find ourselves looking at 3 important Einslage within Winkel: Schloss Vollrads, which of course is an Ortsstil, Jesuitengarten, and Haschensprung. Schloss Vollrads, you can see a little flatter steepness on the slope. Deep loess with sort of interstitial gravel from tertiary marine and sand. Jesuitengarten, you'll find really flat, a lot more fine earth, a couple of producers, Fritz and Allendorf here, and then Haschensprung for Schornborn once again. As we continue our journey further east, you'll find Hallgarten for Schonhell and Jungfer. You'll find Kiedrich for Sonnenberg and Grafenberg. And your Kiedrich Grafenberg, Robert Weil, is a famous producer of that. And then we get to Hattenheim, which I think the Pfaffenberg monopole for Schloss Schönberg is critical. You also find Hattenheim-Manberg and Steinberg. And you can see here's the old Schloss Vollrads with the Vollrads Castle. You can see sort of as we move further past Jungfer and Steinberg, and then down here to the south, you'll find Pfaffenberg. It's a tough map to look at. Let's see if the next one helps at all. As we continue further east, you find yourself in Urbach as the Gemeinde, and important Einslage or vineyard within Urbach is Markerbrunn. Here you'll find again Schloss Schornborn and Kloster Eberbach, excuse me, and you can see that here. And here's the Markerbrunn. Cool. Continuing east, Hochheim, great producer, Schloss Schornborn. Starting to figure this out, right? Hackenheimer Hola and Hackenheimer Kirchenstück. And that's basically the Rheingau. I think these are the most important places that we can look as far as vineyards are concerned in the Rheingau. If you have others that you think are critical that we could add to the presentation, I'd be happy to do so. Now we take a look at the Mosel, formerly known as the Mosel Saar Ruhr, actually split up into those 3 at one time. Romans arrived here in 16 BCE and established a capital. Super famous for Riesling along with the Rheingau, but a softer, prettier style, I would say. Steeper slopes along the river, famous for the single post system. So a single vine being hung on a post, essentially. It's pretty wild. The Hunsrück mountain range is important to know as it affects the region. You find blue slate in the middle Mosel, and then red slate as you get more near to Erden. 2/3 of the Mosel sits in the Bernkastel Bereich. The Grosser Ring is the local growers association. As we mentioned, with the Rheingau having Spatenburgunder and Riesling for their Grossgewächs, the Mosel allows only for Riesling. And then your Bereich of the Mosel, the Bernkastel, the Bergkokum, Obermosel, Ruvertal, Saar, and Moseltor. We'll take a look a little bit closer here. As you break it down, the Anbaugebiet of the Mosel has 6 Bereiche. They are the Bergkokum, Bernkastel, Ruvertal, Saar, Moseltor, and Obermosel. It's important to note that the Gemeinde that we put in here don't stretch off of each one of these, right? So the Bernkastel has the most important Gemeinde. And as we mentioned, over 2/3 of the vineyard sites are in this Bereich. The Ruvertal has a few that are quite important. One here, I would say, is extremely important. And then the Saar has a couple of extremely important ones as well. So we break loose within the Bernkastel. We start in the north with Erden, as we mentioned, sort of red slate. Here you'll find Treppchen and Prelat. So these wines would be labeled as Erdener Treppchen or Erdener Prelat. You always put the ER, the end of the Gemeinde, and then you put the Einzlage name. Unless it's a Grossgewächs, in which you would simply put the Einzlage. Erdzig, important as we continue past Erden, and perhaps the most important vineyard site there, for sure, Würzgarten, or Spice Garden. Great producers here, Monschaft, Urban, and Christoffel. Zeltingen, as you get moving further, your Zeltingen Sonnenheer, and you'll see that here. Velen also has Sonnenheer, and you can see these are split right next to each other. As you continue further south, we find ourselves in the Gemeinde of Grock, and you'll find things like Grocker Himmelreich, Grocker Josephshofer, which is a monopole of von Kesselstadt, and Grocker Domprost. Bernkastel, as you move further south, has two very critical vineyards, the Ley and Doctor. And you can see the Ley one here, and then Doctor here. And then the little area that splits out from Doctor is Alta Bad Stubium and Doctorberg. Braunberg, as we continue further south, we've kind of come down this way, you'll find Ufer and Ufer Sonnenheer, important vineyard sites. For Peasport, you'll find Goldtropfen and Domherr. And then a few that I didn't map out, the Trittenheim Apotheke, Eitelsbach Karthauserhofberg, which is critical, and that's an Alenba sites. And then as we get to the Ruvertal, we find ourselves in the Gemeinde of Mertersdorf. And maybe what I should have done here is put the Bereich first, but this is moving into the Bereich of Ruvertal, into the Gemeinde of Mertersdorf, which is where you'll find Bruderberg, Abtsberg, which most famously is an Alenba sites of Maximum von Grünhauser's von Schubert, and Herrenberg. And you can see Abtsberg here, Maximum Grünhaus von Schubert. Beautiful wines. As we continue further, we find ourselves in Wiltingen here. And you'll have Schwarzhofberg and Schwarzhofberger Pergenskopf. So the top of the Schwarzhofberg hill is known for being systematically botrytis-free, produced by von Kesselstadt and van Volksem, rather red slate. And then, of course, your other Schwarzhofberg famous wine would be from Egon Müller. And that's all right here. Great wines. We mentioned as you get into the Bereich of Saar, you'll find the Saarberg and Saarburger Rausch, probably the most important vineyard site. And then I always hate to give you guys the vintage chart, so to speak, but these are like the greatest vintages that I think you can look for when it comes to German wines made from Riesling, from the Mosel and the Rheingau in each of the following decades. So the 2010s, 2011, and then 15, 16, 17. The 2000s, basically everything was great. You want to avoid 2000 and 2008. The 1990s, 93 through 96 and 98 were great. The 80s a little more tough. You're looking for 88 and 89. In the 70s, you'd be looking for 1975 and 1976. So that's our show for this week, focusing on the Rheingau and the Mosel. I hope that I was able to distill some of the information down, give you some context and ability to utilize this to help jar your memory when you're looking at German wine labels, drinking German wine, or trying to recommend it to your guests, whether it be in a retail setting or in a restaurant. But as always, if you have questions, feel free to fire them off to me. I'd love to see them. If you think there are things that we can do better with the presentation, we'd love to see that as well. I look forward to seeing you all next week. We've got a chat. Hold on. Patrick V. Thanks, gang. We'll see you all next week.